Now today is a really exciting day for me because I want to produce a video that I've been wanting to produce for such a long time but I've never done before. As you can see in front of me, I'm surrounded by pots, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to plant potatoes in pots. Now those of you that are regulars to the channel will know that over the years I've always used the traditional method of growing potatoes. That's planting them into the ground, earthing them up and harvesting them. But as you also know, if you grow potatoes yourself, they can take up quite a lot of space. And now that my vegetable space has reduced a little bit this year, I've had to think of other ways of maximising the space that I've got available to grow certain crops. Now because potatoes take up so much space, I'm going to utilise the growing beds that I've got for other type of vegetables, and therefore by using pots I'll be able to create growing space that I haven't got readily available in my growing beds. So in today's video I'm going to show you how I'm going to plant the potatoes in the pots, and also I'll show you some of the advantages of using this method. The first thing we're going to need is some pots. Now potatoes take up quite a lot of growing space, so the pots that you're going to need for growing your potatoes are going to be quite large. These are 30-litre pots and I've purchased these off the internet. They're heavy duty plastic and crucially they have drainage holes in the bottom. Now I think if you're going to start growing potatoes in pots, it's worth investing in some really good quality pots. I can see these lasting me 10-15 years. I currently have 12, but I've also ordered another 8 which I'm hoping to have delivered over the next few days. And because of my smaller growing space, I plan to utilise these pots to grow other things as well, such as tomatoes, brassicas and other veg. So if you are going to purchase pots, it's worth investing in something of good quality. These cost £17.99 for 4, so it works out roughly about £4.50 each. Now if I do get those 10 to 15 years that I expect, that's going to represent exceptionally good value for money. And I'm sure if you shop around you'll be able to find equally good bargains for yourselves. Now the next thing we're going to need is compost, and you could argue that with 30-litre pots, if you grow 10 pots, that's almost 300 litres of compost you're going to need to fill those pots. So it could get quite expensive. And if you look at potatoes pound for pound compared to other vegetables, they're actually quite cheap. So therefore we need to try and find ways that are cost effective to fill our pots up. Now I'm going to be doing a combination of things. One of those is that 75% of the compost that I put into these pots are with my own homemade compost. There's plenty of videos on my channel showing you how I make compost, and even in a small area that I have to grow in now, I'm going to make as much compost as I possibly can. Another way of bulking out the compost in the pot is to recycle previously used compost. In the wheelbarrow just over here, I've just emptied about 10 hanging baskets that I had from last year's flowers. Now that compost is going to be nutrient depleted because clearly the flowers when they were growing would have taken all the nutrients out of the compost. However, if I mix that into small quantities with my homemade compost, which is full of nutrients, it's going to help to reduce the amount of new compost that I need. And also here I have some purchased compost as well that I will mix in with the recycled compost and my homemade compost, and ultimately it reduces the amount of compost I need to buy. Now the compost that I will be using is a peat-based compost called Clover. Now I found this compost to be one of the best composts I've ever used, but as you know in the UK from 2024 peat-based composts are going to be banned. So we have to look at peat-free alternatives, but while it's available I am still going to use it, and after 2024 my main focus is going to be produce as much compost as I can myself. Now obviously you're going to need some seed potatoes to plant. Now in front of me I have a really popular of second early potatoes called Charlottes, which are the ones that I'm going to be planting today. But there are so many varieties of potatoes out there, it depends on what your favourites actually are. Now over the next few days I'm going to be buying another variety of potatoes as a main crop to plant some other pots in a few weeks time. I haven't quite decided what variety to grow yet. If you watch the channel on a regular basis you'll know that I'm a big fan of Desiree as a main crop potato, which are a really nice red potato. But this year I might try something different. So it'd be great to know what your suggestions are for what type of main crop potato that you grow and have been successful with. And not only give recommendations to me, but anybody that watches the video will also get that recommendation, so that would be really useful. So just pop a comment below of your favourite potatoes so that we can share that with others. And one final thing I have ready is some fish blood and bone here. Now because the potatoes will be growing in a confined space inside the container, I'm also going to add some nutrients to the compost. My favourite nutrient of choice has always been fish, blood and bone. So I'll be scattering some of that into the pots, and you'll see that in a minute when I put the potatoes in the pots. But you can get other specialist potato fertilisers, and they all have the right type of nutrients for the potato. But the reason I favour fish, blood and bone is because it has a really nice balanced mix of nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, which is fantastic for the root growth, the development of the vegetables and just the general foliage, so it's perfect for a lot of vegetables. Now I'm just about to get on with the planting of the potatoes, but first I just want to mention some of the advantages that I think this method have compared to traditional, because I think it's really important. Now, as mentioned at the beginning of the video, because I've got limited space available for growing vegetables, it makes sense that I create the extra space by putting them into pots. And if I were to plant even 2 or 3 potato plants in the beds that I do have available, it would take up quite a lot of space that I do have available, which I can easily use for other crops. So I can still grow the amount of potatoes I need without having large growing spaces by just using the amount of pots that I need. And if you've got a small growing area of yourself, you'll be able to do exactly the same. Now, one of the biggest advantages I see about growing in pots compared to traditional growing potatoes is that the pots are portable, which means they can be moved around. Now, at the time of filming this video, we're coming towards the middle of March, so we're still susceptible to frosts. And if you were to plant potatoes in a traditional bed at this time of year, you are taking a chance that it could be affected by frost. And frost can significantly affect the plant and even kill it. But if you do plant your potatoes in pots and then the weather forecast says that there's likely to be a frost, you can lift them up and take them indoors temporarily just to protect them. Clearly you can't do that with traditionally planted potatoes. So portability is a great advantage. Another advantage of growing potatoes in pots is that the potatoes are going to be less susceptible to disease because they're in a much more controlled, confined environment inside the pot. And particularly diseases like potato blight, which is notoriously difficult to deal with, can be significantly reduced by growing your potatoes in pots. And there are some varieties of potatoes, such as Sarpo Mira, that are blight resistant. Now, here's a message to the seed potato suppliers out there. I looked online to try and purchase some Sarpo Mira from a number of seed merchants. The actual cost of the seed potatoes is always a little bit higher than what you get from your high street store, but I was still prepared to pay that additional price to give them a try. However, what put me off was the cost of post and packaging. 3 out of the 4 seed suppliers that I was looking at were charging a similar price for the seed potatoes per kilogram, but the post and packages cost were nearly £5. Now, it didn't quite double the price of the potatoes, but it was very, very expensive. So my advice to seed suppliers is try and find ways of reducing your post and packaging, because you're putting people like me off purchasing your potatoes. And there are a couple of other advantages that I see. The first one is weed control, because clearly in a pot, if you do get any weeds, you're going to be able to pick them out. If you do use a traditional method, you do have to keep an eye on the weeds because they grow amongst the growing potatoes, but that's going to be significantly reduced by using pots. And another big advantage I see from those who have grown potatoes in pots before is harvesting. If you harvest traditional potatoes, you've got to dig them up. I used to use a fork, and it's difficult to completely avoid spearing 1 or 2 of them and damaging the potatoes. But that's completely avoided with pots, because when the potatoes are ready, all you need to do is tip the pot up, move the compost and find the potatoes. And the potatoes are normally cleaner as well, because if you try and harvest potatoes in the traditional method, say after it's been raining for example, often the potatoes come out very dirty and need to be washed. That is going to be reduced with this method of growing potatoes. So now we're ready to plant the potatoes in the pots. And you'll see around me, I've got my 30-litre pot, I've got my homemade compost, I've got the compost that I'll be reusing from the hanging baskets, and also I've got some of the compost that I bought, and my fish blood and bone. So what we're going to do first is fill the pot to around about 1/3 with compost. I'm going to use a mixture of my homemade compost, which I want to put into the bottom, a little bit of the compost from the hanging baskets. Now, what I'm also going to add at this point, because this is where the potatoes are going to go in, is a handful of fish blood and bone. So that will go into there, maybe just a tiny bit more. And then I'm going to give it a good mix. Then just give it a shake to level it out. And what I'm going to do, because I'm going to put the potatoes in here, I'm just going to put a few inches of the purchased compost just to give it a nice surface for the potatoes to sit in. So now that's all ready for the potatoes. Now, because these are second early potatoes and they don't grow as big as main crop, I'm going to plant 3 potatoes in each pot. The potatoes will have the chits at the top, and the chits are these little sprouts here just that appear outside of the potato. They'll go upwards in the pot. So I'll place them at equal distances inside the pot, and that's how they'll look inside the pot. Then I'll fill the pot up to near the top with more compost. Using my own homemade compost and a mixture of the compost from the old hanging baskets. And when the pot's nearly full, all I'll do then is just compact it down with my hand. What you don't want to do is fill the pot right to the very top, because when you water, the water will just go over the edges. So we'll leave about 1 inch or 2 just at the top, just to allow the water to settle in. All I'm going to do now is just give that a good water and then plant the rest of the potatoes in exactly the same way. This is my little grandson Jacob, and he's come to help me plant my potatoes, and he's been such a good help. He's been filling all the pots up for me. And now, what have you got in your hand?
A potato.
He's got a potato in his hand, and where are you going to put it? Say, where are you going to put it? In the pot.
I'm going to put it in the pot.
You're going to put it in the pot? Go on and put it in the pot for me. Don't throw it. You put it in the pot. How should Grandad show you how to do it gently? That's it. That's not gently. But we put it like this. Do it gently. One more go. Put it gently. That's plop. That's not no good. We need to put it like that, don't we? So let's put it in the pot like that, shall we? Can you get another potato for me, please?
Yeah.
Okay, if you put that one over there for me. That's it. Just put it gently. Place it down. Oh, you throwing it in the pot. Okay, so just place it gently, and the other one. Get the other potato for Grandad. And put that one over there for me. That's it. Oh, my word. So as you can see, Jacob's an absolutely fantastic help. And now what we're going to do, Jacob, we're going to put some more compost in, aren't we? Yeah. And fill it all up. And then when we're finished, we're going to water them all, aren't we? Yeah. Okay, and say bye-bye, camera. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, camera.
Now, as you can see, with the potatoes I had available, I've managed to fill up 10 30-litre buckets, which is quite a lot. And I'm quite pleased with that. All I need to do now is give them a good water. And that's something worth bearing in mind with pots. You do need to monitor the level of moisture in them, particularly in the hotter months. Because they're in pots or containers, they have an ability to dry out much quicker. So make sure you water them regularly. Remember, they've got drainage holes in the bottom, so they will take a bit of moisture. And what I'll also do, when the compost settles just a little bit in the pots, I will put some mulch on top, probably with grass clippings next time I cut my grass. And that, when I water, will help to retain the moisture. So watering can make a massive difference in the success of your potatoes. So if you do grow in pots, you've got to make sure you keep on top of your watering. So that's all my early potatoes planted, and I reckon in around about 14 to 15 weeks I should be able to start harvesting these. In the next few weeks I'll also be planting my main crop potatoes in exactly the same way. One thing I've learned from doing this, it does take an awful lot of compost, and I think that if I hadn't got my own homemade compost, I'd be very reluctant to do this because it would cost quite a lot of money to buy in the compost. So in quite a number of my other videos, I'm encouraging you to make your own homemade compost. And there are videos on my channel showing you exactly how to do that. And this is a really good reason. If you're going to grow potatoes in pots or any other vegetables in pots, then having your homemade compost is going to save you an awful lot of money. I will give you regular updates on my channel showing you how these are getting on, and also I'll show you when I harvest them just to see how many potatoes I actually get. I do hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope it maybe has inspired you to think about growing some of your potatoes in pots. And don't forget, in the comments below, if you could let me know what your favourite varieties of potatoes are, just to give me some ideas for the main crop potatoes that I'll be planting over the next few weeks. So just pop that in the comments below just to share your ideas. I do hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to subscribe to the channel for future videos on how to sow and grow fruit and veg and 1 or 2 recipe ideas, don't forget to press the subscribe button. I'll see you all on the next video.